Hey, welcome back to Jameson's Repair Shop. So now I've got the car basically stripped out, few miscellaneous things, plus the rear differential, brake lines on the back, I like to run along, and fuel line that run parallel to each other. And there's some window trim and the doors. But the doors are staying on for now because that is a part of the next step. And the next step is using this fender skirt to recreate this opening here. So what I'm going to do, and this is all, I've never done reconstruction off of another part before like this. So this is an experiment for me. I don't know how it's going to work out. So what I'll do, I'll make a strip of metal that covers the whole perimeter of this fender skirt. And basically it'll be quite wide because it has to encompass all the bumps and grooves. And then once I do that, I can cut that strip down to match the contours of the body. If that makes sense. It'll make more sense once I get going with it. The issue I'm having, and I do have a bead roller, but I'm not that good with it. So what I'm having is where these fender skirts go in, I should show you. Of course, there's the gasket for the fender skirt. Come in a little closer, right here. So they have to allow for that gasket to go up on the main body. And when these cars were built, there's a slot there for it. A little indentation. And you might not be able to see it there, but there is some that left here. And it steps down and goes down inside for the inner fender and the flange for the quarter panel. So I have to recreate that. So anyway, once I get that recreated using that, and I get this panel built over to here, I'll take that information and I'll start working on the inner wheelhouse for this side. The wheelhouse for this side, not the inner, it's the whole assembly, it's the inner and outer together. So I'll take that and start recreating the wheelhouse. So anyway, I'm rambling on again, let's get this party started. Alright, let's get at this. So first thing I do, I had to measure the perimeter of the fender skirt. I got sitting on this piece of carpet which will disappear when I start welding. But I needed to know how long of a piece of steel I'm going to need to go around this. So I just used this tape, got from my wife's sewing machine. She'll love me for that. So it's 52 inches, 51 and a half actually, or 51 and a half approximately. But I'm going to go 54 inches long, give myself lots of overhang. Well, 53 will probably do it. Yeah, that gets lots over. So that's an inch on each end, so that's enough. So that's what I need. Now this piece of steel I don't have steel that's, without cutting up a new sheet, that's 53 inches. So this one here is 35. So if I cut a couple strips off that piece and weld them together, I'll have enough. So the idea is when I get the steel ready for it, when it comes to the time for that sheet metal steel, I'm going to cut a strip that will, because these aren't flat, these panels aren't flat obviously. So if you're sitting kind of like that, the height of it, total height is, it'll be 3.5 inches. So it's a good 3 inches. 3 inches just to cover it all, but you need to have a flange, so I'm going to go 4 inches. So I'm going to do a piece 4 inches like that, and that will give me lots of flange depth. I always want to go a little over because it's easier to deal with than under. So I already know that, so I don't need this anymore. I'll put that back in my wife's sewing machine kit. Actually, it's my own. I went and got one from the thrift store. But I'm going to bring you in close and I'll show you what I do first. And I already started it. You won't be able to see it from there probably. But what has to happen before I bring you in, I'll explain what I'm doing. The gasket on these, there's no real place, it's an odd shape. There's no real place to sit this thing easily. So the gasket on these is about approximately the thickness of a 14 gauge. And I have it right here. I took them off, they were just stapled on. So this piece right here, and I don't know anybody that's never worked on these, there's a little lip on them that slips over. It slips over the fender skirt like that, and then it's stapled on. And then there's this bead is what seals the gap between the quarter panel and the fender skirt. But the actual thickness at this part here on this is approximately 14 gauge. Very close to it. I mean, this is shrunk down obviously and stuff. So I have a piece of this flat iron that is just slightly thicker than this, just slightly. Not much, just a tiny bit. So it'll allow for compression or shrinkage or whatever. And then you have this tube bead on there. So that's what we're trying to create here for this flange, is a spot for this bead to sit. So because we're building a quarter panel, patch panel here. So we need to have that, otherwise it won't look right. So that's what we're doing. But anyway, getting back to this piece of flat iron I have, I'm using it as a spacer to take up the difference for this. And I have some pieces. Oh, by the way, I've got my coffee too. So it's getting cold, I better have a drink. Oh, coffee, yeah, it's good. Anyway, so what I have is a bunch of strips I cut for tank straps for my F350, and that's 14 gauge. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to continue on wrapping this fender skirt with 14 gauge. And now this doesn't have to be fancy. All it has to be is lower than this surface here. Because when you go to put your sheet metal on, you want to be able to scribe along to mark out your sheet metal. That's a ways out. I was explaining what I was doing, but that's a ways out. Right now, we have to deal with this. So what I'm going to do, and this is a little bit of galvanized, so I'll have to grind that off before I weld it. I mean, it's a little tacking, but anyway. I started already, and I'm going to bring you in before I go into that. Okay, so now we're in there. You can see what I'm up to here, maybe. So I've already, maybe you can't see that piece. All right, you can now. I've already contoured it there to fit this fender skirt. And I have a little slight gap up here. I have it clamped right now, and that clamp is not putting any pressure on the bends. I don't want this to have any strain on the bends, because when you unclamp it, it'll spring open on you. There will be a certain amount, there always is, but while it's clamped, I want it to be as tight as I can get it. So you'll see there's a little slight gap there. So then I have to cut it off here. I'll show you. Just snip it off there and turn it to go down. So this is going to be like a patchwork of things. But again, it doesn't matter about that. That's only a spacer. What does matter is right here. You can see that it's above the fender skirt line. Well, I'll scribe that and take my grinder and just grind that all off once I build this thing. I hope this is making sense to people, and why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it. So basically then I'll take my next piece and I'll just continue wrapping. Oh, can't see that. I'll just continue wrapping this right around, and I have another piece to continue on. And if I need more, I have more of it. So that's what I'm doing. And I don't know how long this is going to take. This could be all day process. It could be 15-20 minutes. No idea. What was I going to say there? It seems like a lot of work, but this wheel opening, if you don't get it right, it's going to look terrible. You'll see it every time you look at the car. So this needs to be built right, not wrong. And it has to be as tight, and not as tight, but as smooth looking in regards to this fender skirt. I'm talking about the quarter panel here now, the quarter panel patch piece. It has to be replicate this, otherwise it's going to look stupid. Let's get this done, get this snipped off. I'll likely just split it and then bend it down, because that's basically almost a straight. You can see that right there. That's almost a straight shot this way. So I'll go down to that bend down there. And it doesn't have to fit this perfectly. Like I say, I'm going to come back and grind it all, straighten it up. And even if it's below that, it's fine, as long as it's a spacer for the sheet metal. So all right, enough chitter chatter, let's get at her. Okay, you can see where I'm going with this now, maybe. And like I said before, this is only a spacer. It's not going to be a part of the patch panel, so I'm going to come back after and trim that. It is opened up here a tiny bit because I have it clamped up there. But that's not a big deal, because I can, once I get the rest made, I'll form it so it all fits in nice. Alright, let's get back at her. So the next one, we'll continue on. I'll weld this one on. Of course, I'm welding back onto that galvanized again. This one here should be pretty good. I should be able to wrap it right around once I get it welded on. And I'll do a little trim on the end here just to get it to fit in there nice, and we'll do it. there she goes. A little more tweaking right here, right there. Get a better angle at it. Just got to bit this tail, but I want to weld a piece on first, a little piece. And it needs to be sucked in a bit there. The reason I don't want a lot of tension on it is I don't want to distort that panel. That's the panel that I'm basing the quarter panel off, so I need to keep it so there's not a stress on it so it doesn't get twisted out of shape. I don't think I explained that very well when I was talking about it. But anyway, so now it'll be marking off all this. Well, do what I said there first. And then I'll go along and I'll trim all that. And then I'm going to use I'm not sure whether I'll weld studs on the back of that to bolt it down into the holes where the pins go, or I'll just use Clecos. If I use Clecos, they're going to be in my way for when I'm doing the 18 gauge. But if I use Clecos, they'll be there for when I use the 18 gauge. So if that makes sense. Now, what I'm up to is I have this piece pretty much fabricated. It needs to be cut shorter on the rear end of it. But what I want to do, there's where the pins go. I'll just show you here. Where the pins go in the fender skirt, I'm going to put some bolts in. So I'm going to weld them to the new piece, the bolts. And I have these just ready rod and these square, they came in a bunch of stuff I bought at an auction, so I'm going to use them. It's just a nut, square nut. So I'm going to weld them on. I have already marked the locations. So I'm going to weld them on to the trim piece. Hopefully I get it right. And then I'll be able to get rid of the clamps for the most part. And these, I'm putting them in the middle of the slot, so if I can pull it one way or another and then tighten it down, just gives me a little wiggle room. So let me get this done and see how this works out. I'll plug the welder in now. Forgot all about that. There she's in. All right. Let's see, something to hang on to the bolt with. No, need my other glasses because I won't be able to see this fine with these ones on. The safety glasses with the bubbles in them. Alrighty, now let's see. I'll try to get these as straight as I can, but it's not critical. Alright. See how that goes. And which one of these I'm gonna have to grind, I'm pretty sure of it. Sure hope I turned the camera on. Yep. Alright, well let me get this mounted, ground up and mounted, and I'll bring you back then. Okay. There she is, all mounted. I've got to trim back. This is a little, that's going to be good though, it's not past the surface. Needs to be tucked in just a slight bit down here. There's nothing holding it. And the same over here, just a clamp on it when I go to build the wheel arch. So what I'm doing, because this is just slightly thicker than the gasket that was there, without the bead obviously, but the base of the gasket between the metal and the fender skirt. What I'm doing, I'm going over it with 24 grit on my grinder and just taking a bunch off just to bring it down some. I'm not measuring it to see if there's any specific thing. I know it's only like a thousandth or so that it's too thick. So maybe not even a thousandth. It's not much, but I'm just going to take a bunch off. Plus it makes a nice surface. So let me get at that. And you'll probably hear the compressor kick in and all that jazz. But for now, I'll tone it down, the sound. So that's what I'm doing. I'll just let you come along for the ride. I'll get a little better angle so you can see. See, there we go. Oh yeah, that's better. You can see what I'm doing there now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue on down here. I get my earplugs back in. I'm kind of yelling because I have an earplug in. So let me get down and I'll clean this up. And there's a spot over here to clean up. And I think they'll be good. Then we can start doing the actual 18 gauge part of it. All right, compressor's probably going to kick in a minute or two once I get going. I think I'm going to call it quits there on that. I think that's looking pretty good. Let's have a look now. Yeah. It's down tight. As tight as I'm going to be able to get it. Taking a little bit off helped. Like I said, that little tail down there, that's going to have to be clamped down, and also down on the bottom there. But the rest is pretty darn good. A good base for a good form, rather, for a template to make that wheel arch. I have the perimeter already ground down for a bit. So now you'll see this filler wire on here. So the filler wire is to represent the gasket beading. Can you see that right there or not? It's got this bead, round bead. This filler wire is smaller in diameter than the bead, but I want it to be up as high as this bead on here, if you can see that. So I want it to be as high as this. So what I'm doing is I'm mounting the filler wire right on top of my metal gasket, we'll call it, my spacer gasket, and then that brings in, and if you fold this back so it sits down nice, that brings that in just level. That bead, that filler wire on top of my gasket makes this completely level. So it's overall, the dimensions will be the same as the filler gasket. Filler gasket may be slight bit thinner but I did grind a fair bit off this. So, I mean, we're talking very, very small amounts. It would even be visible to the naked eye once it's all in the car, as long as it's uniform. So that's what I'm doing there. And filler wire, when I say filler wire, I mean coat hangers. I went to the local thrift store and picked up a whole bunch. There were $1 a dozen or something like that, which, yeah, maybe a little steep, but hey, I picked up everything they had and I have a pile of them. It'll last me the rest of my life probably. So to get there's a coating on these, I just use a piece of emery cloth. A few swipes with the emery cloth takes it right off. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to continue what I started already. You can see it right here, and maybe you can't, but I started tacking on the filler wire onto the spacer. Now I did take a marker. I used this one right here, this big Sharpie, and I went around the whole thing, and then I took my calipers, which I put away, and I scribed in the depth from the face of the fender skirt to the estimated, and I say estimate because I just measured off of the Thunderbird that's in the shop, in the garage here, the red one, the convertible, to where this filler wire would be, like the depth of it, the back of it. So I put the filler wire on the outside of the scribe. So it should, in theory, and I've measured up what I do with my filler wire. Did I throw that back already? I bet you I did. Yes, I did. So if you fold I know you probably can't even see this, but when you fold back the little clip that goes over this, it pretty much lines up where it needs to be. In a place where it's not, there's spots here. This one here, right here, is where it actually measured, because this is where it's flush with the inside of it, and that line that I scribed is right here. So that's, again, but the new piece goes underneath, and this is sitting on top. This is sitting on top of my new gasket, my metal gasket. I hope that makes sense. If not, I'm just rambling on and just disregard what I said. So I'm going to get the welder out, and I'm going to keep tacking these around, and then once I get them all tacked in place, I'll take my grinder and I'll just take the tops off, anything that got above the wire. It doesn't matter what's out here on this side, because as long as it doesn't go beyond the surface of the fender skirt, because that needs to be kept flush. So when I put the new sheet metal pan on, it lines up flush with the outside. So what this is for, and I think I'm pretty clear on what it's for, but I'm going to just go over it again. Anybody that's just joining in here, the reason I'm doing this is that there's a step in these Thunderbirds on the fender skirt area, a little lip. It's a little raised area that the gasket fits in when you mount them on. And if it's not right, they look funny. So I'm trying to make it as best I can. Will it be perfect? Hey, we'll know in the end. All right, back at her. There we go. She's all tacked in. And it's hard to see because of the reflections, I know. Took a little skin off of it just to flatten it out a tiny bit. Not much though, because it has to have most of its height just to duplicate the gasket that was there. Yeah, it's not perfect, but this isn't, just in case people still aren't clear on what I'm doing here, this is not a piece of the patch panel. This is only a form to make the patch panel. So that's why I didn't spend a lot of time out here. There's no need to. Just as long as there's no high spots on here to interfere with the sheet metal. Which I have right here. I'm going to cut about 3 inches wide off. I believe, I'll measure it again, but I think the overall distance to cover this whole thing, if I remember correctly, and give myself some flange area and a little bit of working room, was 3.5 inches. So we'll see. So once I get the sheet metal cut, I'll be clamping it on, and then I'll marking flush with this. And then the big challenge is going to be getting this ledge put in. I got a couple of ideas on how to do it. I might try it 2 different ways. But having that template there, or that this template, yeah, that I just built, will be helpful. It'll give me because this has to be arched around. So once I put the flange in, it's going to be harder to bend without collapsing the flange area. So having this on there, and I may even have to slit like these sharper bends like here, like that one there especially. I may have to slit a groove in the slot area, and so this the flange rides up high and the other one sits down. We'll see, because if I slit it just the distance there, I can just tack it back in again. We'll see. This is all prototyping. So prototyping doesn't always work out the way you want it to. But hey, I'll show what I can, and we'll come up with something. I'm not going to make something and put it on the car that doesn't look good. So if the prototyping doesn't work, yeah, this is all wasted time. So far, I've probably got about 5 hours into this. So in the next video, we'll start with building the wheel arch flange that has this little lip in it, and that'll be the beginning of building the patch panel. So again, 18 gauge. So now we're getting into the serious stuff. Oh, don't forget. Thanks for watching Jameson's Repair Shop, and we'll see you in the next one. Almost forgot that.